this is the acquisition strategy and deal sourcing. So we're starting at the beginning. We're starting at getting an acquisition strategy for your deal making. And we're going to be talking about deal sourcing. Let me just explain what those two phrases mean, because as we go along, I want to introduce some new language to you, which means that some of these words you might not have come across, some of these phrases might not be familiar to you. So an acquisition strategy is how you decide which businesses to buy. It really is as simple as that, because if you haven't got a strategy, you don't know whether this business is one that you should be spending more time looking at. You don't know whether it's a business that you should just disregard immediately. You don't know whether it's too big. You don't know whether it's too small. So we're going to be getting an acquisition strategy formulated for you. And by the way, this won't all come to you during the time that we're online tonight. This is something that develops over time. It's not necessarily something that just like a flash of lightning is there in your head. It might take a little while for you to develop this. And deal sourcing is how you find businesses to buy that match your acquisition strategy. Okay, so this is the cornerstone of everything that we're going to be doing. And I want to take you through the thought process of developing an acquisition strategy. And then I want to show you some methods for generating inbound inquiries of people who want to sell their business. And we'll also be talking about business brokers as well. So we're covering an awful lot of ground this evening, but we're starting from those absolute essential basics, because if we don't get those foundations right, by the time we're getting to the advanced stuff on day 3, 4, and 5, by the time we get into that really advanced stuff, if you don't have an acquisition strategy and if you don't have a deal sourcing strategy, then the foundations aren't going to be there. And I hope that makes sense. And I'm going to explain everything as clearly as I can. And I've explained this many times in front of live audiences, so I know the moments when the light bulb moments, and I'll be pointing out some of those, which I really think are things that you should be writing down. So let me tell you how to get the most out of this program, because I really want you to get huge amounts of value. I want you to be incredibly enthusiastic about buying a business, and I want you to do something with it. And you're only going to do something with it and get lots of value if I think you follow 3 simple rules, I suppose, for the time that we are together. The first is focus. I want you to turn off all distractions. So now it'd be great to close the door on the room that you're in. Maybe you're by yourself in the back bedroom. We'll close the door. Turn off your phone, or at the very least, put it on silent and turn it over so you can't see the notifications. If you are browsing between tabs, close the tabs. I want to remove all those distractions because I want to have your full attention, because I'm going to be covering so much information. I don't want you to miss things just because you've got Facebook open at the same time. So let's get rid of all those distractions, and maybe after this evening, it's a good point to tell your family, just leave me alone for an hour and a half every evening for the next week. The second is to have a positive, open mind, and I think this is really important, because I'm going to be telling you things that are contrary to what you might believe if you have a closed mind. So I might say things that your mind might sort of immediately go, oh, I don't see how that works, so I don't think that could be right. Well, I want you to have an open mind, because we're learning something new here, and the learning will take place far more effectively if we are open to what I'm saying, and also be positive as well. I always have found that the people who are the most successful at buying a business are those people with a positive attitude, those people who say, yes, I can do this. How do I do it? Rather than, oh, it won't work for me. It won't work for me. It won't work. And you know what? If you start saying that, yeah, of course it won't, because you won't ever try anything. You won't do anything, but it would be your loss. So I want you to have a positive, open mind to everything that we're talking about. And I want you to keep the questions, when we do questions later on, want you to keep them relevant to today's subject matter. So admin type questions, paperwork, links, things like that. Keep those for Maria at the office, because I'm really not the best person to answer those anyway. And try not to jump ahead several subjects. So today we're talking about acquisition strategy and deal sourcing. So let's have questions about those subjects. Don't ask questions about, let me just think, negotiating the price of the business that you're buying, because we're covering that tomorrow. And I'd rather cover the questions once I've taught you something, because that will mean that your questions will be more informed. And again, you'll just get more out of this. So the outcomes from today will be, you will know how to create a deal-making strategy. You'll know how business brokers work, and also you'll know how to create deal flow. So as a result of today, you will know how to go out and generate as many inbound inquiries as you want from people who want to sell you their business. And I'm giving you today the methodology that's created, I think it's 352 or 353 businesses that want to sell to contact me in the last 12 months. So this is what I mean about keeping an open mind. This stuff works. You've just got to follow the process, follow the system. Now, throughout this evening, there will be light bulb moments. There will be moments when you go, aha, I just got all my value in that one sentence. And I'm going to flag up and signpost some of those light bulb moments, because I think that some of these ideas are just so valuable. If I don't point you at them and say, look, this is an amazing idea, you might just pass it by and not give it the attention that it deserves. So there'll be a considerable number of light bulb moments, which if you took action on them could be absolutely life-changing for you. And I know that they have for me. So let's just remind ourselves who this is for. It's for people who don't have any experience. So don't worry at any point if you think, oh my goodness, I'm feeling a little bit lost. We're here to help you this week. You may have experience and you want to refresh. Now, these are the people I want to, in particular, say, let's keep an open mind, because sometimes people who've bought a business before, and I'm not suggesting it's anyone on the webinar this evening, but occasionally I've met someone who thinks that they know it all. Okay, now maybe they have bought a business before. Quite often they tell me they haven't done it very successfully, but they have a little bit of a know-it-all attitude. That's why I want you to keep a really open mind, because so much has changed since you bought that business a couple of years ago. I mean, the world has changed, as we know. And some of you are business advisors and you want to offer a new service to your clients, and you don't want to learn by trial and error. Now, I'm going to be saving you from yourselves on many occasions throughout the course of this week, because I know that one silly mistake can cost you a lot of money. One silly mistake can turn a good deal into a bad deal. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you the mistakes to avoid, and I'm going to be showing you the mistakes that I've made over the last 21, 22 years, and how you can avoid them too. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be saving you an awful lot of trial and error. And also, this is for people who want to do deals quickly. What we're going to be doing here is showing you how to find businesses and how to buy them in a speedy fashion. Quite often I meet people, often people who fall into the category of they've got some experience, and they tell me that it took a year to buy a certain business. And I always think when someone tells me that, they clearly haven't had a plan, they haven't had a process, they're not following it properly. They don't know really what they're doing as much as they thought they would. But by the end of this course, you will know exactly what to do. You will know exactly what you are doing. So let's start with what we call the jargon buster. It is unavoidable for me to use some jargon, because I want you to learn the terminology that will get you taken seriously when you're talking to accountants and lawyers. So I'm going to be giving you some jargon of the business buying world. And I want you to start using this, because if we all start speaking the same language and we're on the same page, your questions will be of better quality, and the answers I give you will be of better quality, because I'll know immediately what you mean. So let's cover some of the absolute basics that you need to know. So first of all, when we talk about consideration, it doesn't mean that we're being kind to people. The consideration is the payment for the business. And the payment for the business doesn't necessarily just mean money. It's whatever that payment is made up of, whether it's made up of a combination of money, of shares, of some sort of assets. We'll talk about this later. In fact, we talk about that tomorrow in great detail. But consideration is the word you'll hear me say a lot. So instead of saying, the payment for the business or the money for the business, we talk about the consideration. What was the consideration? How's the consideration made up? What are the constituent parts of the consideration? So two constituent parts of the consideration are what we call the initial consideration, and that's the amount we pay on completion. So the initial consideration is any payment, which usually, to be fair, usually is money, which is paid to the seller of the business, the vendor, as we often call them, on completion. So the moment that company legally becomes yours, or those assets legally become yours, that's called the initial consideration. The deferred consideration, and by the way, I'm spotting these typos as we go along as well. So you don't have to email and tell us about them. I can see them too. A deferred consideration is the balance of the consideration, which is paid over time. We'll come to that in more detail later. Completion is the moment the company or the assets legally become yours. So let's use this in a sentence. On completion, we are going to pay the consideration. We're going to pay the initial consideration, and then we're going to pay the deferred consideration, which is the balance of the consideration, over a period of time. And then this is an acronym that you need to know, because if you don't know what it is, the first time you see it, you're going to act very confused. The first time someone says it in a conversation, if you look a little blank, unfortunately, that does not help your credibility. So EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So this is the amount of money that the company earns before it pays or it receives any interest, before it pays or even receives any tax, and also prior to the depreciation of assets. Usually it's the physical assets that depreciate, and amortization, which in this scenario is the depreciation of intangible assets. So EBITDA is our very technical way of saying profit. Okay, so we'll come across this phrase a lot, but I just wanted to give you that little glossary to get started, just so we're on the same page. So let me give you some more actually. So the next phrase is deal sourcing. Quite simply, that's finding businesses to buy. Business brokers. Now, business brokers are like estate agents. They are the go-betweens who get paid for advertising and selling businesses. We'll talk more about business brokers later on. The next phrase is the deal team. Now, the deal team are the people that you outsource all the hard work to. Now, I just want to be very clear that on this course, now, I'm not going to teach you how to become a lawyer. I mean, you go to university and you study that for years. I'm not going to teach you how to become an accountant. Is an accountancy course 7 years? I believe it might be. So you're not going to learn how to be a lawyer or an accountant in 1 week. And likewise, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant. I'm not going to give you legal advice. And I'm not going to give you accountancy advice. I'm not going to give you tax advice either, for example. So all of that advice needs to come from the members of your deal team. So you need a great lawyer, a great accountant, great HR, great due diligence, etc. And I'll tell you later how to start building across the course of the week, how to start building that team around you. Due diligence is the checking that your deal team perform to establish the performance and validity of the business. Because I'm going to tell you one very important fact right up front. You should never believe anything that the vendor of a business says. The person selling a business to you will say sometimes practically anything to get you to buy their company. Now, at the beginning of a relationship, you need to take this at face value, because you haven't got any evidence that they are maybe misleading you either on purpose or misleading you by omitting certain pieces of information. So the due diligence is this checking, not done by you, but done by your deal team, to assess the business and to assess the facts. So you know exactly what you're letting yourself in for. So you know exactly what it is you are buying. And I think that's a really, really important part of this. Due diligence changes everything when it comes to buying a business. The business that looked amazing when the business owner was telling you about it, it looked amazing on paper, may not be so amazing once due diligence has started. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't buy the business. What it does mean is that it has an effect on the price and on the terms. So understanding that due diligence is, and sometimes I see people say, oh, I'm not going to bother with any due diligence. I understand the business. It's a very simple business. Well, on your own head be it. It can be a very, very expensive mistake avoiding due diligence. So that's our jargon buster for today. There'll be more like that as we go through the week. So you'll build up quite a glossary of phrases and terms in the for the business buying community, if you like. I want you to introduce you to our first big idea of the evening. And this is to get off the org chart, the org chart being the organizational chart. Now, let's say you own a business right now. And I know some people on the webinar this evening, you own a business, which is fantastic. You probably head up that business because you own it. Everyone reports up to you. And quite often people who run a business are headless chickens, constantly solving other people's problems. Now, if you don't own a business, what you mustn't do is buy a business and become the head of that business. Otherwise, you're in exactly the same position as the person who's already got a business. You become the go-to person. You solve everyone's problems. The buck always stops with you, and you're in the office every hour of the day. When you buy a business, your first action point is to get yourself out of the running of that business. So get off the org chart. So if someone says, how's your business operated? Who are all the key people in your business? And you mapped it out on a piece of paper, your name wouldn't be on that piece of paper. And when you get off the org chart, it frees you up in time, it frees you up in energy, it frees your mind to do the deal making rather than just the doing, which is what business owners tend to do. So buying a business is not about creating a job for yourself. And this is one type of business to avoid buying, a business that you realize all you're going to be doing is buying yourself a job. So that's a big type of business to steer clear of. Now, if your current business is really a well-paid or maybe a not so well-paid job, use an acquisition to remove yourself from the day-to-day running. You see, the excuse that many business owners use when they have a business, usually a smaller business, they say, well, I can't afford to have someone else to run the business. That's why I have to run the business. Well, you can't afford to have someone else to run the business because it's a smaller size business. So why don't you use an acquisition to double, if not triple, the size of your existing company to allow it to be big enough so that you can put someone in charge of it. And the moment I've done this, it has always been the most liberating feeling, because I know then that I'm not going to be solving everyone's problems all day long. I'm paying someone else to run that business on a day-to-day basis. And this allows you to work on the business rather than in the business. And if you haven't read Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, he wrote it over 30 years ago. I will save you the trouble of going to read that book, because I can summarize it in one sentence. You work on the business rather than in the business. And a business that you work on will always be more successful than a business that you work in. So get off the org chart. Now, I want to open your eyes with some very, very simple figures as to what happens when you turn from someone who's a doer, the person who's in the business every day, into someone who is a deal maker. And I know when I've shown this to people before, they find it quite stunning because it is so simple, but it will completely change the way you think about your future in business. So think ahead 20 years. Let's say you have 20 years of business profits ahead of you. So let's say your business makes a modest £100,000 a year profit. So over 20, and we've used simple numbers for the sake of this explanation. So over 20 years, you've got £2 million going to come into you in income if you take all the profits of the business. But if you become a deal maker, and over the next 20 years, you sell 4 businesses, and you sell for a multiple of 7 times profits, you will add an additional 28 years. So the 7 times the 4. So we're selling 4 businesses at 7 times profit over the course of 20 years. That's on average every 5 years. So nothing extravagant here. You will add an extra 28 years of additional income. So that's an extra 2.8 million. So let's put this a different way. And this is the last sentence on the screen here. A doer, someone who just operates the business, takes their 100,000 every year, will earn 2 million over the next 20 years. But a deal maker who every 5 years on average sells a business for 7 times profits will earn 4.8 million pounds over exactly the same time period. And the difference is learning how to buy a business. So our doer, all our doer does is sit behind a desk and do stuff. Our deal maker is doing what we're doing on this course, and as a result can more than double the amount of money they make during that time. And I know when I've explained to people, they said, hang on, just Jonathan, say that all again. Well, I could say it several times, and it takes a little while to sink in. So you may want to come back to this on the video in the future. But if you just operate a business, you are massively suppressing your earning opportunity over a period of time. And when you start, you may say, okay, well, I make 200,000 a year profit for my business. Well, look, just double all the numbers up. You will make 28 years of additional income doing what we are talking about today. So, that's the first sort of big idea that I want to introduce you to. So another big idea, and quite frankly, this is worth the course fee in itself. You've got to figure out how when you buy a business, you can pay yourself a deal fee. Let me explain what a deal fee is. A deal fee is the fee that you get paid for being the smart person who invested in yourself, invested in your knowledge, went out, found a business to buy, negotiated the deal, put the whole thing together, had the deal team, took it over the line, and bought a business. Now you think, well, okay, I understand that, Jonathan, because I guess that is a pretty smart thing to do, but who's going to pay that deal fee to me? Well, the business that you buy. Now, you can't do this with every business, but with some businesses, you can take a considerable deal fee out from buying the company. Now, let me give you an example. I was selling a business a few years ago, and the people buying it, by accident, sent me a spreadsheet. It was not intended for me. And when I opened it, I realized, hang on, this doesn't make sense. This is why are they sending this to me? They sent it by accident. And it showed the structure of how they were buying the business and how they were raising the money and where the money was coming from. And they had incorporated into the money that they were borrowing to buy the business. And don't worry about that too much because we'll be covering finance and things later on. And they'd incorporated a £600,000 deal fee. So there were three partners in this firm. So they were paying themselves £200,000 each for being the clever people that identified the deal and put the deal together and bought the business. Now, it may not be £600,000, but hey, if it's £25,000 or £50,000 or more, that's not bad. So the question to ask yourself is, how do you pay yourself a deal fee? And sometimes this is buying a business that already has cash in the bank, or buying a business that maybe has some assets. I mean, I bought a business that had, we discovered 80 Apple Mac computers in a very large cupboard. Well, it's more of a storage room, really. And we didn't need them for the business. I had no interest in owning 80 Apple Macs. So we found someone who just buy them as a job lot, and he paid us £40,000. And that effectively was my deal fee, because we found those Apple Macs the day after we bought the business. So we were able just to sell them. And hey, there's £40 for just opening the door of the storage room, and everyone had forgotten that they were in there, sort of. So the question to ask is, how do you pay yourself a deal fee? So if you can pay yourself a deal fee, you make money when you buy the business. Now, that often comes as a bit of a surprise to people. You can actually make money when you buy a business. You don't just make money when you sell a business. You can make money when you buy a business. Here's another big idea I want to introduce you to, is that buying a business is 80% a sales and marketing process and 20% a legal and an accountancy process. Now, if you ask most people what it involves to buy a business, they'll say, oh, well, it's all about the lawyers, and it's all about the accountants and the tax people and the due diligence. But well, yeah, that is obviously a very important part of it. But really, buying a business is 80% the sales and marketing process. You see, not only do you have to find the business to buy, you have to convince the owner of the business that you are the right person to sell the business to. And here's an idea I want to put in your head. You're not going to be a tough guy negotiator in any of this. You're going to be the nice person, because no one is going to sell a business to someone that they do not like. If they do not like you, they will not sell the business to you. And let's just think about that for a moment. It's all about being the nice person, the easy to get on with person, the person who's positive and friendly. Now, that is just a really important character trait, because, as we said, 80% is a sales and marketing process. They must like you. That is what gets the deal done. When you get to the sticking points in buying a business, there'll always be some. There'll always be something. I'll tell you who creates them, the lawyers. The lawyers create a point where they're arguing over one sentence. If you can pick up the phone and say to the vendor of the business, the person who's selling you the business, hey, look, the lawyers are arguing, this has gone on forever. They're charging us by the hour. It costs us both a fortune. How do we solve this problem? They have to like you. That is absolutely key and absolutely critical. So let me ask you this. What is your strategy? Now, I know that many of you already would have a strategy, and you will already know what type of business you want to buy, but many of you don't. Now, even those of you who do have a strategy, I want to help you refine your strategy, and you may well throw your strategy out the window and start afresh as a result of what we are talking about here. I'm going to give you 6 types of company to buy. So the first type of company to buy is a company that sells a product. Now, this might be quite appealing to you if you already sell products. There's another product for you to sell. Maybe it's appealing to you if you sell services. So maybe you're a service business and you want to add a product line to your business. Now, let's look at the opposite of that. You are a service business. Or you're a product business currently, and you want to add a service, or you're an existing service business and you want to add additional services. So we've got product companies to buy, and we've got services. Now, that's where most people stop. They say, well, okay, that makes sense. I can either buy a company that sells a product or a company that sells a service. Of course you can, but there's a lot more to it than that. You could look at your existing business and buy the suppliers to your existing business. Or if your first acquisition falls into category number 1, the product business, you might discover that buying your suppliers would be the second or the third acquisition that you do. So you start to own the supply chain. to your company. You might want to buy your distributors. So I know someone who was spending so much money on courier services, he thought it would be a lot simpler just to buy a courier company than pay out so much money to the courier company that he was using. And by buying the courier company, not only did it cut his own costs in his existing business, he could actually sell those courier services to other companies and make an additional profit there. You might want to buy your competitors. Now, many people tell me that they dream of buying their competitors because there's quite a lot of ego stroking involved, isn't there? If you buy your competitor, it certainly makes you feel good. I have bought my competitors, and yes, it does feel good, but it also has a very strategic purpose, because what happens is that you remove people from the marketplace, which means that your sales and marketing becomes more effective. You're not battling against someone else. And of course, you get all of their customers and all of their inquiries. And then number 6 is you buy complementary businesses. So again, I'm just thinking out loud of a client with an art business, and he was spending a lot of money on framing, framing as in the packing frames in order to pack and to ship. So he bought a packing and shipping company that did artwork, so it was complementary to his business, and now he could offer this to not only to his competitors, he could actually offer it to all and sundry. So it was complementary to his existing business. You might also say that could actually be part of his supply chain as well. It probably ticks both those boxes, actually. So these are the 6 types of company to buy. Now, here's something I want you to think of. If you own a business right now, I know that not everyone does on the webinar, that's fine. But if you do own a business like right now, your business might not be particularly valuable if you were to sell it. So why don't you look at 1 or 2 or 3, or maybe all 6 of these types of companies to buy, which would then reposition your company for the highest exit value. You see, look, if you're going to sell your business one day, you may as well sell it for the most amount of money. The way to get the most amount of money from it is to make it a bigger, more profitable business. And the way to make it a bigger, more profitable business is to make an acquisition. And this is the summary of your 6 choices. So now we're talking about defining the sector. What sector should you be buying a business in? And this is one of my most frequently asked questions. So I want to explain the thought process that will help you, because I think that the quicker you start to put together an idea of what your sector should be, the faster you can take action on all of this. I always say keep it simple. Don't make any of it as soon as someone starts telling me about the business they're thinking of buying and their thought process behind the strategy, and it starts to be complicated, I say, guys, please, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it just really, really simple. Buy a business that you already understand. So you've got to think, what is it that you know? What is it that you have some experience of? Because quite frankly, I think probably if you buy a business that you don't understand, then you are going to come unstuck on that pretty fast. And a business that you can learn quickly. So maybe you understand it, but there's always going to be things to learn, but you can learn it quickly. You don't want this to be a learning curve going on for years. Or maybe something you can get help to understand. Someone else will help you understand it. Now, I did this with my investment into the early years sector, which is nurseries to you and me, and I got some help to understand it from people who'd been in the sector already. And initially, I hired them on a consultancy arrangement. They weren't employed; there wasn't any business to employ them into, and I just paid them for their time, so I could pick their brains to help me understand. And also, when defining a sector, you want to be thinking, who could run this for me? Now, there are 2 places to find a person who can run a business for you. The first is someone who's already within the business. So you take someone from within the business and that person runs it for you. That's not the owner. The owner's gone. They've sold you the company. We're looking for someone else. Maybe it's in straightforward businesses, it could be the office manager who's been there since a year dot, who knows the business inside out and backwards, and actually, quite frankly, probably does run it most of the time. This is the question that I ask owners. I say, when you go on holiday, who runs this place for you? So if you were to go away for a couple of weeks right now, who would you trust to run everything? They go, oh, well, Jeff's amazing. He's been here for 25 years. He knows the business better than I do. Great. Well, could Jeff be the person who runs that business on a day-to-day basis? So when you're looking at a sector, these are your considerations. But there are some sectors to avoid. Obviously, anything you don't understand. Retail generally is tough. You've got to really know what you're doing. I mean, you've got to know what you're doing. And even if you do know what you're doing, it's still incredibly tough. Highly regulated markets. Sometimes a market can be so regulated that there's a change in legislation. Like, for example, the next example here, change in legislation. And as a result of that change in legislation, sometimes you don't have a business overnight. And industries that are being disrupted, the example we used to use for this was the taxi cab business, being disrupted by Uber and Lyft and all of those upstart competitors. Everything was just changing, and really, you could never hope to compete. So this is what you need to be thinking. You need to be considering the Venn diagram, if you like, between the opportunities that are there in front of you. What are the opportunities you can find? Your skills and your knowledge, your personal goals, and the bit in the middle is where you make the money. That's where the deal happens. The deal happens right there in the center. So to choose a target sector, where does opportunity meet with your goals? How will your skills and knowledge help you? And can you work on the love while you delegate the hate? Let me explain to you what I mean by that. There are things that you will always love about business, and there are things that you hate. So what you might love, if you're like me, is the deal making, is putting the deal together. What do I hate? The administration. I hate all the bookkeeping stuff. I just don't enjoy that. So I want to delegate all that out, and I want to do the love bit. I want to do this, and that's what makes work into fun, and that is what means that you will always enjoy getting up in the morning because you've got a fun day ahead of you. And so this is your sort of your Venn diagram of decision making, if you like. But let me just add a layer of complexity to it, if you like. You've got two different types of business to buy. You've got profitable businesses and you've got distressed businesses. So a profitable business, because it's profitable, because it's making money, it is going to instantly produce income for you. There's probably an established management team, which obviously is going to be one of the main reasons why it's profitable. It's an easy bolt-on to an existing business if you have one, and it may not be working at its full capacity, but it's profitable, it's making money, and if you don't change anything, it will still make the same amount of money, all other things being equal. Now, we've got a different type of business, which is a distressed business. Let me explain what I mean by this, and we really should have included this in the jargon buster, because there's a little bit of jargon here. A distressed business is a business that has seen better days. It maybe is on the verge of making a loss. Maybe it is making a loss. So it's not as rosy as a profitable business. It's distressed. Now, there's a different way of looking at this. Sometimes you can have a profitable business with a distressed owner. So the business actually is profitable. It's the owner who's distressed, but more about that later on. You see, you can buy a distressed business for £1. You don't need any finance. You don't need to do anything particularly complicated. For £1, you take over the business, you get all the assets, and you get all the contracts, and the liabilities in the business can be managed. Now, this is very important. don't go around buying businesses for £1 unless you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. Quite simply, because if you're taking on the liabilities of the business, then you will you could come unstuck if you don't know how to manage those liabilities. On Wednesday night, we'll be talking about the differences between buying assets and buying shares in the business, and you need to know that before you go out and buy that company. But these are your two choices. Now, profitable businesses definitely are easier to buy because they're already running well, because they're making a profit. A distressed business is for people who like a challenge, and I must admit, I quite like a distressed business. I quite like a bargain. You know, I like to buy something that can be improved over time. But I will tell you right now, buying distressed businesses can be hard work. It's not for the faint-hearted. It requires a bit of effort. It requires you to be a fast mover. It requires you to be an action taker. You can't hang around too long making decisions. You've got to have a plan and stick to it. Now, on Friday, I'm going to be giving you the takeover plan of what happens when you buy a business. So that will help you as well. And also, of course, with a distressed business, there's always going to be scope for cost cutting. And this is my favorite way to turn a distressed business into a profitable one. You basically cut the costs as much as possible. Quite often the distressed businesses are distressed because they have too much overhead. They're in large offices, they've got too many staff, they do things that are unproductive, they're very old-fashioned in many ways. So there's an opportunity there for people who feel that they could be good at doing a turnaround, to buy a business effectively for nothing and do that turnaround. But again, we'll be covering this again as the days go on. And you see, when you buy a distressed business, just by having a new person at the top and getting rid of the previous owner, that brings fresh energy and perspective to the business. So this is the analogy also is the new football manager, the new team manager coming to the team. The team suddenly starts to perform better because there's a new manager there. It's not the best analogy because you aren't going to be managing this business, but just by cutting out the distressed owner, that in itself often has the most positive effect. There is huge ROI potential once you turn things around. I gave you an example on the initial webinar that you attended of a business that I bought for £1 and 11 months later sold it in a multi-million-pound deal in 11 months. So 11 months from buying it to selling it. So the return on investment potential is absolutely huge. And you're not going to be doing that every day of the week. But if you find one of those every year or so, then wow, yeah, that certainly has a life-changing impact. Something I get asked a surprising amount is, where should I buy a business? Where should I buy a business? And I've really only got one thing to say about that. Keep it close until you have a trusted management team. Don't go buying businesses in other countries unless you have a management team who can be flying backwards and forwards, because believe me, you don't want to. Keep it close. I mean, I don't see the point in living in London and saying, hey, I'm going to buy a business in New York. Unless there's always a caveat to all of this, unless you are, let me use the same example I used earlier. You are an art dealer in London and you buy an art dealer in New York and it's under management. So when the owner leaves, it still runs and you're very familiar with that type of business and it speaks to a completely different market. Yeah. That's a great example of the exception that proves the rule. But the rule is keep it close. Don't go buying businesses the other side of the world. Buy something the other side of your town. You know, let's be sensible for starters until you've got more experience. And then we've got the size. You know, people say, how big should a business be? Well, you know, how big should an acquisition be? Well, it's a bit of a tough one to answer with a definitive answer. But yeah, as a general rule of thumb, 600,000 of turnover plus. But it's going to differ. It's going to differ, you see, because there are exceptions. When you are buying for example, when you're buying the contracts and rolling them into an existing business, let's say you're an IT company and you see an IT company for sale they do £300,000 of revenue. Okay, it's just fallen beneath our 600,000 threshold. However, those £300,000 of contracts, if you just bought the business, closed down the office, moved some staff that you might need, but definitely the contracts into your existing IT business, then suddenly you've added maybe 150,000 pounds of bottom line profit out of those 300,000 pounds of contracts. So there isn't one size fits all, but don't go buying little tiny businesses where there is no chance of there ever being a profit. Because let's think about it. If you can't make a profit out of it, why would you buy it? You know, we need to make a profit out of our businesses. And then I want you to think about the outcome from your business buying adventures. Obviously, cash flow, you want money to come in. I think that's very important. You might want to make your existing business bigger. You might just want the experience. I say to people quite often, look, don't get too hung up on the first acquisition. If you do it the way I'm going to teach you this week, it'll be de-risked. Nothing bad is going to happen. So why don't you just go and buy a business? I would rather you did that than deliberated over it for a year, because I know that people who deliberate over it for a year never, ever do anything. So just buy something for the experience using the methodology that we're talking about. Maybe your strategy is to buy and build. And you've seen me do this several times over the last 2 decades, really. I've done it several times over 20 years. But you might see that as a great strategy for yourself. But I will tell you, there are incredibly successful private equity companies doing buy and build strategies. And that's just for the sake of the jargon buster. That is where you have a platform investment. Let's say you have an IT company, or you buy an IT company, and then you buy 3 or 4 or 5 other IT companies to make it into a big IT company. And then you sell that big IT company to someone else. So it's a great strategy. It's the road to making an awful lot of money. So it's certainly, I think it's certainly worth considering. And maybe you want to buy a business to flip it. So you want to buy a business with the sole intention of selling it on once you fixed it up. My example 5 minutes ago, the business I bought for £1 and sold for millions plus. 11 months later, I never intended to keep it. I had no intention of keeping it. For me, it was incredibly short-term thinking. It was buy it, fix it, find a buyer, flip it. And that might appeal to you as well. I would suggest that over the years, your strategy might involve several of these different things. You won't just do one thing. I do actually have a client at the moment who's doing incredibly well buying businesses out of administration. I mean, that's his strategy. So we've talked a lot about strategies here, but I wanted to focus now on what an attractive opportunity looks like. I mean, how do you know that a business is a good business to buy? And I'll just give you the heads up on this, is that I said to you, we'll do 60 minutes of content and then we'll do some questions. What I'm going to do, because I really want to get this week started right. I want you to get huge amounts of value tonight. What I'm going to be doing is giving you some additional content. So we're going to fill up most of the 90 minutes with content, but I will tell you later how you can ask me questions, because don't forget, you've got access to me throughout the week. I'll tell you how you can ask me questions later. So don't worry if you've got a question, it will be answered for you. So how do you identify an attractive opportunity? Well, a growing market, that's always a good sign. A business where you can find customers easily. I mean, I get so excited when I see a business where they figured out the marketing and they say, well, we get all of our leads in this way, and it costs us £8 a lead, and we convert 1 every 5 leads, and 1 every 5 leads is worth £1,000. And it's like, they've got a process. So that's always a good business to look at. A business that can't be easily copied. You know, they've got the secret sauce. They've got some license. They've got something that prevents other people from copying it. That's a business that will have more value when you sell it in the future. Clearly a business that's scalable. So I'm thinking, okay, if I buy this business, is it going to be stuck at this size? Or is it a business that we can grow as it becomes more successful? Is it a business that has management in place? You'll hear me refer to management. Management are so important here. Is it a sustainable model? Is it one of those businesses that's a flash in the pan and it will be gone by the end of the year because that fad will be over? Is it a business that I can improve? If it's making 20% EBITDA, remember our jargon buster, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, making 20% EBITDA, and it's not being run very well, could superior management run it better, and could we make that into a 25, 30% EBITDA business? So these are all the considerations that I take into account. And then very importantly, the committed seller. You want someone who's committed to the process, who's committed to selling. Excuse me. Let me give you some critical rules for success. And I've got 13 of these. I think it's 13, yeah. So let me just give you my 13 critical rules for success. Remember, you don't have to write everything down because you have all this recording, so you can watch back and watch this and listen to it as many times as you want. First, you can't tell a good deal from a bad deal without deal flow. You need to have deal flow. You need to have lots of businesses to look at. By the end of this webinar, you'll know exactly how to do that. But let me explain to you what I mean. If you only got one business to look at, how do you know it's a good business or not? Well, you don't really know. But if you've got 6 or 7 or 10 businesses to look at that are all very similar, you can start to see which ones are the good ones and which ones are the not so good ones. You'll make a better buying decision if you've got good deal flow. You pay for the past, but you buy it for the future. So many owners of businesses try to sell you on the future, and they try to value their business. And we talk about valuation tomorrow. They value their business on what it will do in the future. That's not the right way of valuing a business, as we will discover. Look, your job is not to find the most perfect business and buy it. Your job is to find a business you can make great. Yeah, if you're looking for the perfect business, you're never going to find it. And then you can ask yourself the question, what are the skills necessary to make this business a success? And then who is going to provide them? Because here's the thing, I don't think it should ever be you. I think it should be someone else. Otherwise, you are buying yourself a job, not a business. Ask yourself the question, what could kill this business? What are the risks? What is it that could go wrong with this business? Because that is the risk factor. And there's nothing wrong with risks as long as you know what the risks are. Fall in love with the profit potential and not the business. I mean, I have worked with mastermind clients over the years who have told me about this amazing business. They tell me all the wonderful business, and they tell me, and then when they start saying things like, oh, and the managing director's office, you should see the views from the office. And I know what's going on here. They're imagining themselves running that business. It's become a romantic relationship with the business. I mean, that is just plain wrong. Fall in love with the profit potential of the business, not the actual business itself. Stick with easy to understand businesses. We've said that. It's got to have management. I'm always a little bit wary of partners. I'm not sort of so keen on having partners. I think you can do this yourself without partners. Avoid startups. You will find that startups will approach you and they will tell you that they are pre-revenue. Now, I'm not going to add this to the jargon buster because I think it's just plain silly, because pre-revenue means they haven't made any money. Why would you buy a business that has never made any money? They have not proven themselves. You want a business that's been trading for at least 5 years and got itself over that hurdle. Avoid franchises. When you buy a franchise, a franchise really is a job. It's not really a business, because if you buy a franchise, you'll have to run that business exactly the way the franchisor tells you to. You can't have a different website. You've got to keep the name. You've got to do a certain marketing in a certain way, and the branding and the pricing and everything stays the same. So avoid franchises. Don't even go there with franchises. Spread your risk. If you're going to buy one business, I would say, why don't you buy 2 businesses or 3 businesses? The interesting thing is that the business that you think is going to take off quite often isn't, and the business that you think is going to be a slow burn becomes the overnight success. So I have something called the rule of 6. The rule of 6 is where you invest over a period of time in 6 businesses. So you buy 6 businesses. When I say invest, I mean you buy 6 businesses. And some will do better than others. And then next year you sell one of the 6 businesses and some money enters your bank account. You have what we call a liquidity event. You've sold a business, you've made some money, but now you've got 5 businesses. So you need to go and find another one to replace the one that you sold. So you've now got 6 businesses again. Next year, you sell another one. You don't know which one it's going to be, but you sell another one. And you have this liquidity event. Lots of liquidity, i.e. cash, arrives in your bank account, but you're down to 5 businesses. You replace the 5th, replace the one that you sold with another one, you're now back to 6. So you spread your risk. So we call it the rule of 6, and it's something worth following. So let's move on to what a good deal looks like. We call a good deal a star deal. A good deal is a star deal. A star deal has 5 different elements to it. First, you have to have a highly motivated seller. Highly motivated seller. If you do not have a motivated seller, it will be very, very difficult to do a deal. If you've got someone who says, well, not really sure if I want to sell the business, I'm quite happy here. If someone made me an offer that was so good I couldn't turn it down, then of course I'd consider it. But I'm not really that bothered. I mean, that isn't motivation. What you want is someone who says, when you ask them the question, when would you like to sell this business? They say, yesterday. That's motivation. So you're looking for motivation. Secondly, you're looking for a seller who's got a sensible concept of valuation. A sensible concept of valuation. So they don't think their loss-making business is worth millions. They're sensible about the valuation. They're realistic people. You want a business that has clear potential. If it's gone as far as it can go and there's nowhere to take it, then your upside is going to be limited. The potential is the bit that you do not pay for. It's the bit you get for free, but it's the bit where you make your money. You make your money in the potential zone. And then structure. We'll be talking about deal structures on, is it tomorrow, is it Wednesday? We'll be talking about deal structures soon. But you want a deal structure that works for you. Obviously works for the seller as well, but it has to work for you. It might be kind of okay for the seller, not ideal, but kind of okay. But for you, it has to really work. It has to be great for you. So it has to, the way you buy the business, the structure of the deal has to work for you. And then I want simplicity. My star deal has to be simple. As soon as someone tells me there are 5 shareholders, 2 don't want to sell, 1 wants to hold out for the multi-millions, all these different scenarios. One's on the other side of the world and hasn't got anything to do with the business, and we can't ever get hold of them. I mean, that sounds to me like a crazy business to buy. I mean, that could take ages to put together the deal, and it might never happen because all it takes is 1 person to pull out. So I like a simple deal with 1 person who owns it, or maybe 2 people, husband and wife own it, and they just want to sell. So this is the elements of a star deal. Now, what you should be doing is every business you look at is I'm going to tick off these 5 elements. Do we have a motivated seller? Is their valuation, is their belief about the value of the business sensible? Does the business have great untapped potential? Can I buy the business on my terms? And is it going to be a simple deal, or is it going to be a nightmare? I'm talking to one at the moment, separated business partners, acrimonious split. One wants to sell, the person who's talking to me, the other one doesn't. It's a battle. I'd rather let them fight it out and come back to me once they've reached an agreement. I'll just forget about it and leave the door open for them to come back. I like absolute simplicity. Now, let's talk about motivation a bit. We want to find the reasons for selling the business. And I want to know why someone is selling their business. I really want to know this, because if I know why someone is selling their business, this will help me get a better deal. Now, if you don't find this out, then you will not get such a good deal, quite frankly. Every business is for sale. This is what you have to remember. People want financial freedom. Now, that's a phrase you'll hear sometimes, maybe not very often. but you will hear it. Maybe they've got another business that requires their attention or they find more interesting. Sometimes they say they just want to get off the treadmill. They've had enough of this business. Maybe it's become too stressful, and maybe it started to affect their health. Maybe there are family reasons. Sometimes it's, I thought my son was going to take over the running of the business, but he's just emigrated, so he's not interested. So now I'm selling the company. Retirement. Now, retirement may not be top of this list, but it will be the top of the list of all the people that you speak to. You will find more retirement sales than anything else. And I love retirement sales because quite often people have put a date in their mind by which they want to get out, and that's brilliant. They're putting some pressure and a deadline on themselves. You've got people who maybe have made good money over the years, so it's not all about the money. It's now all about getting rid of that stress, getting off the treadmill, and enjoying their retirement. Maybe there are creditors. Sometimes people get scared when there are bills that they can't pay, and they just want to sell the business because they're so concerned about that big tax bill that's been threatening to come and bite them, and they feel that it's about to bite any moment, so they just want to sell the business. Now, what you need to have are strategies for dealing with that tax bill and dealing with that situation, because you might be able to pick yourself up an amazing business if you know how to deal with creditors. And maybe the business didn't deliver. One I bought from a private equity firm, they told me they had high hopes of the business. It just didn't deliver at the level that they hoped for. So that was the reason for them selling. So these are all the reasons for selling, and we'll dig into these in a little more detail tomorrow, because I want you tomorrow to understand the whole conversation that you're going to be having with the business owner and the psychology of that conversation. But I just wanted to flag up some of these reasons for selling right up front. Now, I want to give you an overview now of the entire business buying process. So on one slide, I'm going to give you this process because I want you to see all the different elements of it so that you can understand where you would be in the timeline. So sometimes when people are buying a business, they kind of get stuck. So they don't quite know what's going to happen next. Let me tell you what happens next. The first part of this is to acquire a target list. Now, a target list is a list of all the businesses in your sector that fulfill your criteria, that are businesses that if they were for sale, you'd have a look at. So let's say you want to buy IT companies in the UK. Well, you would put together a list of IT companies in the UK. I'll tell you how to do that in a moment. The next is making contact with the targets. We want to make contact with the targets now. And then we want to receive inbound contacts. Now, I'm going to give you this entire process in a few minutes' time. So don't worry about the details yet, because I'm just giving you an overview at this stage. Then we're going to have a telephone call. We're going to get an NDA signed. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. And then we're going to arrange a meeting. Now, my preference always is for that meeting to take place where they come to you. It doesn't matter if you don't have an office. For many years, I used a hotel reception down the road from me. It's actually where we hold our mastermind programs at the Richmond Hill Hotel. And I would meet people in the reception of the hotel, and there'd be if you've been there, there's some sofas, and we'd just get a cup of tea and I'd pay for the teas at the end of the day. Then you want some documents. These are some documents, some basic documents for you to review to understand a little bit more about the business. And then we're going to have the second meeting. Now, the second meeting probably is on site. So it's at the office, at the factory, at the production plant, whatever it might be. And at that second meeting, we're going to construct a deal. And we're going to put together a deal to buy the business. We're then going to reach heads of terms. Heads of terms is the agreement that says this is what a deal will look like. It does not legally bind you to buying the business. It does not legally bind them to selling the business, but it puts in writing the bare bones of the deal. And then we're going to start due diligence, and we're going to run the legal process that's putting together the contract in parallel with due diligence. Now, don't worry, because you're not going to be doing that. You've done almost everything up to this point, but now we're going to let the lawyers and the accountants take over. Now, as a result of due diligence and going through that, we're going to end up with a price renegotiation. We'll cover more about this as the week goes on. Then we're going to complete the deal. So we remember, in our jargon buster, we now legally own the business. And then there are going to be post-completion adjustments. Now, this is all part of the negotiation, and elements of this we are going to be coming back to every evening this week, but I want to give you an overview of a process so that you know where we are. Everything on here we're going to be talking about this week, and you're going to become really knowledgeable. I'm going to give you all the information you need to become knowledgeable about all the parts of this process. So let's get to what I think is the really exciting bit, which is places to find deals. Where do you find these businesses to buy? Where are they? Well, the first great source of businesses is, in fact, word of mouth. And word of mouth is, it may not sound particularly exciting, but word of mouth is is a great way of finding businesses that aren't actually advertised for sale, but someone knows someone who knows someone who's had enough of their business and wants to get out. So word of mouth is very effective. Number two is accountants. It might be your accountant, it might be other accountants, but I found that accountants are a great source because quite often people consult their accountant when they're thinking of selling. Websites. There are lots of websites out there that list businesses for sale. Some of them list thousands of businesses for sale at any one time. I must admit, though, I've never used a website, but the websites are out there. Next, we've got LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is a good source, obviously, of business contacts, and I would encourage you, if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, to connect with me on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is a place to find businesses. What I would avoid, though, is the post that I sometimes see people putting on LinkedIn where they're saying, anyone want to sell their IT company? And it's kind of like, I just don't think that's great. There are other strategies for LinkedIn, which we'll cover later. Events, conferences, and trade shows. If you want to buy a particular type of business, and there are going to be 5,000 owners of that particular type of business at a conference, at a trade show, at an event, obviously not, maybe not this year, but next year, in one place for 3 days, get yourself a ticket and go along for 3 days and have chat and coffee and network, and you'll find so many people who are disillusioned by their business, who know someone who is looking to get out. Business brokers. This is the default for many people. They say, well, why do I need to do anything other than just go to business brokers? Well, I'll give you plenty of reasons why today. And then number 7 is sending out letters. And this is incredibly effective. And I'll give you all the reasons why this evening. And number 8 is, okay, that says letters as well. Number 9, that says letters. Number 10, well, I'm messing with you. Letters are the top way of getting businesses, finding the right businesses to buy. So letters, 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 letters. If you don't do anything else, you send out letters. If you send out letters, you will find all the businesses you could ever possibly want to buy ring you up and email you. And that is the main deal sourcing methodology that we're going to be talking about here. But let's talk about how business brokers work, because I know that whatever I say about letters, there'll always be someone who says, well, I think that if I just phone a business broker, they'll send me 20 businesses to buy. Well, yes and no. They might well do that. They might not. But I've never needed to do it. I've never needed to do it. But let me tell you how brokers work, just so you understand the process. So they typically charge a business anything between £2,000 and £25,000 just to list the business. So they advertise the business. Now, that fee is for advertising the business. That fee isn't for selling the business. To sell the business, they might take 2 to 8%, sometimes more, of the amount that the business sells for. They receive an awful lot of inquiries. Brokers are inundated with inquiries, and they need to filter out the time wasters. And their assumption is that you are a time waster and it's your job to prove otherwise. The disadvantages of business brokers is that they play buyers against each other. Just like estate agents say, well, we did 3 viewings this morning and I know one of them is going to put in an offer by 5 o'clock. So if you want to buy the property, we need an offer from you as well. I mean, is that true or isn't it true? We don't really know, do we? That's what business brokers do. They are professional sellers. They can be very good at selling. Now, the opposite is also true. They could be absolutely terrible at selling. But you see, if you're going to be in a negotiation with someone, I would prefer you to be the best negotiator. You don't want to be pitting yourself against someone who's been doing it for 20 years, which is what might happen if you go through a broker to find a business to buy. And they want to vet you. And this is the bit that many people feel really uncomfortable about. Now, business brokers also have advantages. It's not all doom and gloom. They have advantages as well. They prepare the information that they know a buyer will want to see. You see, without the business broker, sellers are incredibly disorganized on most occasions. And they digging around trying to find the information. They haven't got the management accounts. The broker's got all that stuff together before the business goes on the market. They can also exert pressure on the seller. So they can say to the seller, look, you need to get a move on here because I've been talking to your buyer today and your buyer is going to pull out because he's found something else if we don't get a move on with this. So they can put pressure on the seller that is easier for them to do because of the relationship than you. I mean, if you get all confrontational and give people ultimatums, you're going to lose the deal anyway. But the business broker can put pressure on the seller. And they help the seller know their numbers. I mean, I'm constantly frustrated by the people who are selling a business who don't know some basic facts and figures about their company. And business brokers realize how frustrating that is. And they help the seller know their numbers, preferably before it goes on the market. So let me give you the broker process so you understand the process here. They will want you to complete a questionnaire, and this questionnaire can be quite searching. Have you bought businesses before? What are your investment criteria? Where will the funds be coming from? Will you need help with finance? They ask you that question because they want to sell you finance and so forth. Then they will ask you to sign an NDA at the same time, a non-disclosure agreement. They'll want to see POF. They want to see proof of funds. So proof of funds are the, in its simplest possible terms, they want to know that you've got the money to buy the business. Now, this is like playing poker with experienced poker players and you've never played before, and they all say to you, well, you do realize that you've got to show us what your cards are. And you go, oh, really? I didn't know that, because you're a naive newbie to poker and you show everyone your cards and suddenly you lose the game. Surprise, surprise. If you show a broker your bank statement or something like that, oh my goodness! I mean, you've just lost. I mean, that is it's just downhill from that moment onwards. I'll tell you how to deal with proof of funds. When will I be telling you how to deal with proof of funds? In a moment, in fact. They may prevent you from meeting the seller. They'll say, well, the seller has engaged us to sell the business and they don't want to get involved and everything has to go through us. which means that you'll never discover that they've got their flight booked to Australia to emigrate in 3 months' time, and they need to sell the business to be on that flight. And there's a huge amount of pressure for them to sell the business before that flight leaves. So you'll never find that out, you see, if you're speaking to a broker. You're placed at a massive negotiating disadvantage. They will want you to put in an offer. And I'm going to teach you on this program why you should never, ever, ever put in an offer to buy a business. You never put in an offer to buy a business, but a broker will insist that you put in an offer. Now, the thing is, if you use my strategies with the owner of the business, they will see exactly why putting in an offer is not good for either party. A broker will see it black and white. They've got a process they follow. They say put in an offer, and you might feel under pressure to do so. And then, of course, they will reject. They will automatically reject the offer that you make, and then Chinese whispers. On the very few occasions that I've ever done anything with a broker, you will find that when you actually do get to speak to the seller of the business, maybe even after the deal has been completed, you'll find that there was massive confusion. And brokers get confused. They're dealing with lots of different sales at the same time. And the last thing you want is the wrong piece of information or the wrong, you don't want the broker going back to the seller and saying, he's very demanding and he wants this and wants that. And you're thinking, well, no, I'm not demanding. That's been completely misinterpreted. See, if I'm just talking to the owner of the business and it's the two of us or the three of us, then no one can misinterpret anything. There's lots of Chinese whispers when it comes to brokers. So I said I'd show you how to deal with this proof of funds question. So this is where the broker says to you, we want proof of funds. Before we go any further, we're not even going to tell you more about the business. We want proof of funds. And I see people try and wriggle around this and avoid this. So this is, but they don't do it very successfully. So let me tell you how the best way of handling this question. First, you bring it up first. You say, well, look, I know that we don't know each other. We haven't worked together. So I want you to realize that we are a bona fide business, and our interest is genuine, and we have the ability to follow through. What that means is you're not just going to be all talk. If you want to buy this business, you have the ability to buy the business. Second, have a letter from your bank, your accountants, or a finance broker ready to go. So this is where you have a chat with your bank and say, look, I'm thinking of doing some acquisitions. Would you support me if I was to buy a business? Now, the bank manager is not going to say no, but they're not going to say, well, we'll just give you the money, whatever business you want, we'll just hand it to you. Of course, they're not going to say that. What they're going to say is, we judge it all on a case-by-case basis, but in principle, we would be willing to support you should the business acquisition make sense, and bank jargon to that effect. So the bank might well give you a letter just saying that, say, look, that'd be really helpful in my conversations with people to let them know that I've already started a conversation with my bank. Your accountant is probably going to be more amenable, and we're saying, we've acted as an accountant to John Smith for the past 12 years, and we know and understand his intention to acquire some businesses, and we know that if the numbers stack up in a deal, I'm using the wrong language, but you kind of know what I'm saying. If the numbers up in a deal, the deal becomes financeable. It's all very, very woolly, but all you're trying to do is to get past the gatekeeper with this. A finance broker is way more willing to give you a letter saying, yes, we can fund any acquisition that John Smith wants to do, because don't forget, they are selling their services and they want you to use their services. And third, you've got to have authority and confidence. Your conversation with the broker can't be hesitant. You've got to sound like you know what you're doing. Now, I'm going to be giving you lots and lots of knowledge across the course of this week, and that in itself is going to build your confidence. Using some of the jargon that we're talking about, that in itself is going to help build your confidence. That's going to massively build your confidence because you'll be speaking the same language. But all of this will start to become clearer as we go on. Now, Let's talk about using letters to source deals, because this really is my favorite. And if you get this right, you don't ever need to ever talk to a broker ever in your life. So using letters to source deals. Why would you use letters? Well, it's fast. So I could get a letter out the door today. It arrives tomorrow. If I want to double the number of phone calls that I get, I double the number of letters that I send, and therefore it's completely scalable. So, if you want to buy, lots of businesses, then you just do lots of letters. It really is as simple as that. So let's get into the mechanics of the letter. You have a template from us. There'll always be someone who didn't receive that from us. We'll just contact the office tomorrow. They'll be able to help you. We want everyone to have that. And there are two versions. There's a short version and a long one. Use my template. But please adapt it to the types of businesses that you are sending to. Use some common sense with that. So you just need to adapt the language to your target market. Now, remember, if you are looking to buy a business in a market that you understand, that's easy to understand, that you have some knowledge of, then of course you will know the sort of language to use. With my early years, my nurseries business, I talk about things that are relevant to nursery owners, which of course would not be relevant to an IT company, for example. But the template is that it is a template for you to adapt. Personalize it. I always think you should add something personal to the letter. I believe in at least one, maybe both of those nursery letters. And I say I believe because I've been using the same letter for several years. I've been using it for a while, okay? Because when something works, there's no need to change it. So I don't sort of read it every day or anything like that. But I put in something about having a daughter and looking at nurseries in the area, and that's what got me interested in the nursery sector. A lot of people deliberate over, should they use just plain paper, photocopier paper, or should they get a special headed paper with a company name? And well, something, you can do this with headed, you can do this with plain paper. Just do it with plain paper. You just need a plain sheet of paper. It doesn't have to be fancy. And think of it like this. If someone wants to sell their business, they're not going to not phone you because your logo wasn't on the top. All right. So just keep it nice and plain, nice and simple. There is only one exception to this. If you're going after larger businesses to buy, and we're talking 5 million revenue plus, then you might want to think about the image a little bit more. With smaller businesses, then just plain paper with the letter photocopied onto the paper is absolutely fine. Now, you might want to consider who is it from, because sometimes you might not want people to know that it's from you. Well, for some time, I had an assistant who did some phone calls for me and some admin in the office, and she was happy for me to put her name at the bottom of the letter, simply because, well, why not? It really made no difference to her. So the inquiries from the letter actually went back to her, but it meant that people didn't find me on Google and go, what's this guy who buys and sells businesses interested in my company for? So who is it from as a consideration? And then how does someone respond? I always give people two methods of response. I give them a phone number and I give them an email address, because some people like to phone or text, and some people don't want to talk to anyone. They prefer to send an email because they just aren't good on the phone. So this is how we use the letter then. And I'm going to give you a couple more. I'm going to move just onto social media just for a second, and then I'll come back to the letter in a moment. So social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and so forth, is very, very useful. I mean, I don't use it a huge amount, but I can give you just some stats of times when I have used LinkedIn. Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on. Let's just get that back. Sorry, I made my own screen disappear. yeah, you can use Facebook ads, that sort of thing, display ads on LinkedIn, Facebook, and you can also, if you've already got lots of people that you're connected to on social media, then I think it could be worth telling them that you're interested in buying a business in a certain sector. The more specific you are, the better response you're going to get. So we've got here on LinkedIn, I just done with 1,000 ad impressions. I got 17 responses, 3 quality leads, and from that 1 to 2 deals. Because this is a little bit out of date now, I can tell you actually it was 1 deal. We thought it was going to be 2, but it was 1. So yeah, so 1 deal from that. And those 1,000 ad impressions, I believe, if memory serves me correctly, cost about £150. So not very much money to find a business that was buyable. So the question to ask yourself is, how many social media connections do you have already? You never know. The business to buy might be in there somewhere. It might already be in your existing connections. So the word of the day, I'm going to give you a word of the day each day. The word of today is action. I mean, you could post something. I wouldn't do it tonight. I'd do it tomorrow. You could post something on social media tomorrow. And if the word of the day is action, why don't you take action on that very, very simple thing? Do it tomorrow and just see what happens. You never know what might happen. So let's just come back to the letter, because I want to just finish this off, because I want you to be really clear on the benefits of this and how it works. Now, some people get really caught up in the details, so I want to just cover off the details of mailing the letter. Should the letter be franked, or should it have a stamp on it? You know, people get to this sort of granular detail. Well, you know something. I think it should always have a stamp on it. I'd prefer to have a live postage stamp on it, because I want it to look like a personal letter, because I want the letter to be opened by the business owner. And quite often I put on the envelope private and confidential for the directors only. And that means that someone else isn't going to open the envelope. The envelope is going to be opened by the owner themselves, because it says private and confidential on it. White envelope versus brown envelope. Well, the only brown envelopes I ever seem to receive are from HMRC. That's they're the tax collectors, for those of you not in the UK. So I never use brown manila envelopes. I just think they just look so dated now. So I use a nice white envelope. People sometimes say, well, should the letter be handwritten versus printed? And there's people talk about this, I think, way too much. Just use a photocopied letter. That's all you need to do. Quantity. When people say to me, oh, Jonathan, I sent out some letters and I didn't get a response. Well, that's because you sent out 25 or you sent out 50. I mean, it's not enough. You need to send out large quantities. I'm talking hundreds at a time. Now, it's a bit of a pain, isn't it, to photocopy those letters, fold them and put the envelope in the envelope and put the stamps on. But hey, if that turns into a business acquisition, then why wouldn't you do that? Pay someone else to do it, get your children to do it, get someone in your company or your office to do it. You can outsource all of this if you want to. And sometimes people say, well, Jonathan, online there are these services, can't even remember the name of them, it doesn't really matter, but there are services where you upload your letter and your data and it automatically mails it all out for you. And sometimes they advertise that it's cheaper than the postage stamp. Well, it looks absolutely awful when you receive it. We want your letter to look personal. We want it to look like it's come from a real person rather than something that's just automated. Hope that makes sense. Now, you're going to start getting responses within 24 to 48 hours of that letter arriving on people's mats. So here are some things that you need to know before those responses start coming back. Do only take calls when you are in a place that you can have a 20 to 30 minute conversation. If you are waiting for a train, if you're on a train, that's not the best time to take a call because it deserves your attention. I always prefer to call people back in that scenario. And I say, look, I'm about to get on a train. You're not going to get my full attention. And I really want to understand your business and what your intentions are with the business. And therefore, your numbers come up on the screen. Can I call you back when I reach my destination in an hour? And people always say, well, of course, because they want to have your attention. They don't want you to be distracted by your journey. Here's the thing that may not seem a big issue, but it will be once you start doing this. You need to make a record of every call as the call happens. So someone's contacted you, you're on the phone to them, or maybe you phone them back. Just have a simple spreadsheet on your laptop and just type into the spreadsheet the person's name, the company name, their phone number, and the information that they give you over the phone. The reason why is after you've had 3 conversations with people who want to sell their business, you will be so confused about who is who. You just won't be able to remember. You know, was that the person who was telling me about this, or was that the person who wanted to retire in 3 weeks? I mean, you will not be able to remember. So write it all down. Now, we use a system called Circle Loop. Circle Loop is an app that you download onto your phone, and you can get a number from Circle Loop, either a mobile or a landline number, and that's the number that goes in your letters. So when people phone you on that number, it rings on your mobile through the app, a little bit like phoning someone through WhatsApp or phoning someone through Facebook Messenger. It just rings on your phone. Now, on the desktop version of Circle Loop are all the mechanics of it, so you can redirect the numbers and do all of those clever things. But what it also does, if you want it to, is it records the call. Now, different people have different opinions about this. And if you don't feel comfortable recording a call, then don't do it. But if you do feel comfortable doing it, listening back to that call will be the most incredible learning experience, because you'll realize what you said right, what you didn't say very well, the bits where you sounded professional, the bits that could do with some improvement. But it records the entire call. The next thing to know is how long this call should be. Quite often people want to tell you their life story on this call. This call should be no more than 30 minutes, preferably 20 minutes. And if the business doesn't meet your criteria, i.e. it doesn't fit in with your strategy, then this call terminates in 2 to 3 minutes, okay? I prefer to avoid long calls, because this is really an initial call. I'd then rather have one a few days later if necessary, or meet face to face. So keep this call reasonably short. And you might want to use virtual assistants for taking these calls, and that might be very tempting to outsource this immediately. Can I tell you why I don't think you should be doing that? I don't think you should be doing it because you need to get good at this conversation, and you need to build that rapport and relationship for when you meet them. If you've never spoken to them before the meeting, it's really far more difficult to have that meeting. It really, really is. You need to get the relationship started right from the beginning. Now, what we're going to be doing tomorrow is telling you what to say. I'm going to show you what to say on that first call. I'm going to take you through all the questions to ask. I will also tell you the questions that they are going to ask you, so you can have your answers prepared. And also tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the subject of how much do you pay for a business? How do you talk about money, the value? And I'm going to give you some very clever negotiating tactics so that you can comfortably get a price that works for everyone without making an offer. I'll also explain to you tomorrow why you never ever make an offer to buy the business. So that's what we're covering tomorrow. But what have we covered today? We talked about having the right mindset right at the start. So positivity is key. You might be feeling slightly overwhelmed by everything that we've been talking about today, but that's completely understandable because it's day one. So don't get concerned, don't get worried. Let's just take it step by step throughout the week and keep that right mindset of being positive and open-minded. We've got you thinking about your strategy, and I want you to now feel as though you know a lot more about finding businesses to buy, and we're going to do a lot more tomorrow. So we were going to allocate about 30 minutes for questions that I've actually used up by giving you the content today, but I will take a few questions, and I'm going to tell you how I'm going to be answering all of your questions going forward, so that you all know how to do that. But let's just jump to some questions first of all. Now, I've got plenty already in my Q&A box, so you don't need to send any more questions because I have got just so more here. So I've got just scanning down these. I've got a really good question here from Chris. Hi, Chris Williams. Is the initial call the qualifying call? Yeah, it is to a certain extent, because I want to find out very quickly, is this business one that I should be meeting with? So is the strategy to send out as many letters as possible, say to IT companies, i.e. they just fit into your sector, and the call is about filtering them down your deal funnel? Yeah, Chris, you've absolutely nailed it. That's a very, very good way of putting it. What I see sometimes, and people I think are wrong, and they do this, and I always, if my mastermind people start going down this route, I always pull them back and I say, guys, look, remember, we're going top of the funnel, nice and wide, and then we're going to narrow it down until we buy a business. So yeah, sometimes I see people filtering too early on, and they say, I have gone through every IT company in the country and I found the top 3 that I want to buy, and I'm going to send those 3 a letter. Well, the chances of those 3, any of those 3 being a business that wants to sell are so slim, you'll just be disappointed because you won't get the results. So start nice and wide. Businesses that on paper may not look like a business you want to buy, or if you look at their website, it might not look like a business you want to buy. You could be quite surprised when you speak to the owner. Can we, hi, Rosalind, good question, Chris, thank you. Rosalind says, can we send a letter via email? Well, not really, because I want it to be marked private and confidential, and the only place you're going to get someone's email address is typically off their website, which is going to be an info at or a hello at. I want it to be marked private and confidential for the directors only. I do see some people trying to shortcut by sending emails. It's never the same. Send it the old-fashioned way, even though it might be tempting just to hit a button and send out lots of email. David, thank you very much for your kind comment. Tushar says, do you think buying a group of care homes is a good idea? Well, it's a tough business to be in right now, I can tell you. I can tell you it's a terrible business to be in right now. It's awful. But, on balance, when we're through this awful period that we're in now, then absolutely, care homes are a solid business. Okay. Darren says, where can you get contact details of companies to send letters to? Well, there are several. The simple answer is data brokers. So the simple answer is that you go on Google and there will be dozens of people who sell data. They're sometimes called list brokers. We used to call them list brokers. And they have lists. So it could be people who subscribe, and we've used IT as an example so many times, we might as well stick with that. They might, let's imagine that there is a magazine called IT Today. There might well be. And they have got the list of the 60,000 subscribers to IT Today that you can rent from them, 1,000 names at a time. And you say, well, let's test 1,000. You might have to pay 200, 250 pounds for that data. And then as a result of that, you send out some letters, see what response you get, and then you go back and you rent some more data from them. So you're looking for list brokers, data brokers. Nelson, thank you very much for your comment. Nadia, I think I've just answered your question there. See, what's going to happen is going to be lots and lots of questions that are very, very similar. So I'm going to be telling you in a moment in fact, now I tell you now how we're going to handle this. Tomorrow morning, we're going to send you a link to a private Facebook group. And I know just about everyone in the world is on Facebook. There's always going to be 2 or 3 people who aren't. And that's easy to rectify. You just go to Facebook and you just open an account. You just open an account for the purpose of joining this Facebook group. It'll take you 5 minutes to do. It's really, really simple, really easy. And in the Facebook group, I will be able, with the assistance of some of my colleagues on different subjects, to be able to answer every question that you post. And we'll be sending that to you tomorrow morning. So from tomorrow morning, you'll be able to post all these questions and see answers. Now, what I would encourage you to do is, before you post your question, look to see if that question's already been asked and answered Otherwise, there's no point posting it. If there has been, there's no point posting it. I hope you see the sense of that. Craig says, thank you for a great presentation. Thank you very much, Craig. Very good of you to say so. The market sector I know a lot about isn't really a growth area. However, I think there's several markets I know nothing about that are enormous growth areas. Must I stick to your strategy of buying something I know a lot about? Well, look, let me just give you the thing here. I'm terrible when it comes to technology. I know nothing about technology. If I was to buy a technology company, it would be a disaster. It would be the fastest road to bankruptcy because I would not know anything about this business. Now, I didn't know anything about the nursery sector when I started buying businesses in that sector, but it was actually a business that I could get my head around the business model fairly simply. It's a service business. The customers are the parents of the children. There are fees. You collect the fees. You provide the service. Next month, you collect more fees and provide more service. It's quite a straightforward business. Lots of business in terms of the business model. There are lots of legislative and legal things. So I hired someone in to help me with that. So don't go and buy something that's so crazily out of your comfort zone. Like, like for me, it would be like a technology company. I wouldn't have a clue. You're always going to do better with businesses that you know than businesses that you don't know. Question here. You said don't buy tiny businesses. What's your minimum size and how do you define it? Well, it depends upon the sector, but as I think I said earlier on, £600,000 of revenue, if you know what the profit margin would be in that business, then you know how much profit it should be making. And all of these things, by the way, we are returning to. We haven't just finished strategy and deal sourcing tonight and we never come back to it again. This is just the beginning of the journey. So we will be returning to this again and again and again. Thanks, amazing info. Thank you very much. Joe says, when you used your assistant's name with the letter, did they answer the phone or email response, or was it you? No, they answered and then passed it over to me. So they answered, set up a phone call for me to have a chat with them. Yeah, I think I've answered that, Darren. Dave, I think I've answered your question, Dave. Yeah, lots of questions about the same thing. So this is the thing. There's always going to be lots of questions about the same thing. Everyone has the same thoughts going through their head and the same excitement and the same things they want to know about. So I'm going to answer all these in the Facebook group, which is only going to be people on this program, so that therefore, when you see my answer, you won't need to ask the question yourself. So would you recommend sending a letter from a company or a group of companies, says Darren, or from a person? No, it should always be from a person. The personal touch is very, very important. It should always be from a person. How do you deal with proof of funds with administrators? Well, that really should be a letter from your accountant or maybe from your bank, because an administrator is a slightly different type of deal. We're not talking about it today, we're talking about tomorrow. Remember, the rule is, let's stick to the subjects that we're talking about today, guys. Administrators kind of is more for tomorrow, but what you really need to do is to when you're buying assets from an administrator, you need to have the cash ready to go. It's a different type of deal to the majority of the deals we'll be talking about. Okay, question here from Ben Killeen, says, how can you find out the question, why are you selling the business, if they weren't and it was me who contacted them? Right. They're not necessarily advertising the business for sale. They're thinking about selling the business, which is why they've contacted you. So it's a slightly different mindset. Yeah, I know it looks, well, how do you know that they're selling the business? Well, you don't. This is the thing. You're sending out letters prospecting. You're looking for people who woke up that morning and said, you know what? I have had enough of this business. And I have people come back to me who say, I've received 3 or 4 of your letters and the timing wasn't right. It's just become the right moment to talk to you. I've binned them in the past, but this one, I just had to give you a call. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. Thank you very much for those kind comments. Cyril says, I'll be starting in, oh, I've lost the question. Sorry, it just whipped up there. Cyril, we'll find that again in a moment. Aisha says, hi Jay, I think you said to buy only businesses above 600,000, quite high. My house isn't worth that. Okay, but we're not buying your house. We're buying a business. It's completely different. Yeah, this is the thing. Yeah, because your house hasn't have a value of 600,000 doesn't mean you can't buy a business of 6 million. You know, it doesn't make any difference. Again, this is about having an open mind in the mindset, and I want to build your confidence to make you realize that you can do this. Do you send follow-up letters or just wait for a response? Yep, I send follow-up letters. Absolutely. Not immediately, maybe a month later, because I want to be touching the same people again and again and again. One doesn't do it. I tell you, can I give you the analogy for the follow-up? It's like saying, let's have a website, everyone. We're going to build a website for our company. Let's put the website up for January, and then we'll take it down. We only need it for January. No, the website's there all the time. The website's there all the time because you never know when someone who wants your product or service will find your website. It's like that with sending out these letters. You never know when someone wakes up thinking, I want to sell my business. They're not going to all want to sell their business the day your letter arrives. But for the 2 or 3 people who do, it's absolutely amazing timing. How do we deal with the fact that lots of companies will not be in their offices? Can you mail them at home? Well, if you have their home address, but I doubt whether you have their home address. Getting company addresses and office addresses is really easy. Getting the home addresses of directors used to be more straightforward because it used to be a legal requirement that directors listed their home address at company's house, and that changed years ago. It's the thing is, if you're going to be mailing businesses, you're going to be mailing their business address. Now, I realize lots of businesses aren't there right now, but people still pick up their post. I mean, I went to my office this morning. Was it this morning? Yeah, this morning to pick up the post. So people still pick up their post. They still open their post. Where do you find distressed businesses to buy? Says Andrew. Hi, Andrew. Exactly the same way. Sending out the letters. The distressed business owners are the ones who call you first because they have the highest level of motivation. How do you send letters in volume without using automated letter sending companies? Thank you, Ken, for your question. I didn't say don't use a mailing house to put the letters in the envelopes and send it out. I use that. I use mailing houses. But what I did say was you don't upload your letter to one of these online services who then print it out. It looks like a robot has done it. Well, actually, a robot has done it. And it looks so automated that it just looks fake. I use a mailing house that takes my photocopied letter, puts it in the envelope, and puts a live postage stamp on it. So there is a difference between the two. Is it better to hand sign the letters or just send photocopies out to several business owners? Yeah, well, you can only hand sign small quantities. I want you to be sending out large quantities. You will only be successful at this if you send out large quantities. That's really, really important. You can, photocopies are fine. I went through a phase of, not even having a photocopied signature. I just sent it out with my name at the bottom, but without any signature. Makes no difference. That was actually one of my best responses to that letter. I've just been asked by Andy, should we register a limited company now ahead of time or wait until heads of term stage? Oh, don't do it now. I often register the company like 2 days before the acquisition takes place. You don't need to do anything like that now. You're jumping the gun. Tariq, good question, but not relevant to tonight. Can we cover that a little bit later on? Sanjay, thank you very much indeed. Shakir, question about due diligence. Let's talk about the questions about due diligence when we're on the day when we do the due diligence training. Thank you very much. Yes, Kevin, I will be. Thank you. Really interesting. Look forward to the rest of the week. Love the deal fee idea. Yeah, you see, sometimes all it takes is one idea, and that's oh my goodness, how can I take money out of this? How can I make money from buying this company? How can I make money from buying this company rather than just making money from when I sell the company in the future. We'll be talking about that later as well. Great presentation. Thank you very much. Thanks for today. I learned a lot. When you say about sending a letter from your assistant, would the letter be from her point of view? Would she say, we are buying businesses, in terms of the personal touch? Would it be putting in something personal about her life? No. Yeah. You make a good point. Who is that asking? That's a really good question. That's a really good question. Yeah, it's slightly more general. I believe that possibly one of the letters you've got actually does have my assistant's name in it, but I will cover that in more detail in the Facebook group, if that's okay, because I want to do that justice. Okay, people asking me questions with lots of detailed numbers around EBITDA. You know what? It's 10 to 11 in the evening. Not sure if I'm best place to answer that. I'll answer that in the Facebook group tomorrow. How often do you follow up? I follow up every single month. Alex, do you send out the letters to all the companies in your target sector without pre-looking at the company as a whole? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I do that. I do that initially because if I'm entering a new sector, I want to find out about what's available to buy in that sector. So I might go into it with a certain criteria, but after a few days of talking to people on the phone, I'm thinking to myself, well, actually, I might need to change the criteria. So thank you very much, John. Thank you for your kind comments. How many letters should the first batch be? Yeah, I would definitely get 200 or 300 out the door immediately. And when you start to see the responses coming back, that will build your confidence. And then you can start sending out more and more and more. Hi, Jonathan. Don't you think the Netherlands are too small for this? I don't know what the population of the Netherlands is or how many businesses there are, but no, I don't think so. I mean, it's a whole country. I mean, I guess, no, surely there must be, I don't know. I mean, you know better than I what the numbers are, but no, I don't think an entire country is too small. Absolutely not. David says, hi, David, how do you respond to sellers when they ask you about your company VAT number when you don't have one? Why would they ask you that, David? We talk about the conversation with sellers tomorrow, so let's cover that tomorrow. I've never been asked about a VAT number. I'm not sure. There is no relevance. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that at all. Great. Right. There are so many more questions. I'm going to love the rule of 6 idea. Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's brilliant. Who do we email regarding the template deal sourcing letter? The office. Email Maria. Email the office. Is the email address that you've been receiving emails from that allowed you to know that this was the webinar to come on tonight. Okay, right. What I'm going to do, I'm going to call it a night tonight because it's getting late and we need to get some sleep, all of us. So that's the end of tonight's training. We'll be getting you onto the Facebook group tomorrow. It won't be 8 o'clock in the morning. You'll be getting an email before lunchtime about this. We'll get you onto the Facebook group and then we can continue these questions. And then I'll meet you back here at 9 o'clock tomorrow evening for tomorrow night's training. I hope you've had some fun. Guys, this is going to be so much fun because what you are learning here is going to just give you so many more opportunities than if you don't have this knowledge and this information. And I just want you to implement it. Don't just become someone collecting information. I want you to be implementing this stuff as well. So thank you very much for your attention this evening. It's been a lot of fun for me. We've overrun slightly. I hope you forgive me. We will not be overrunning on future evenings because I'm very conscious that we have beds to get to, children to wake up in the morning and that sort of thing. So I hope you had a great evening with us. And I will see you in the Facebook group tomorrow afternoon and then back here tomorrow evening at 9 o'clock sharp. You know how it all works now. I hope you're looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you're feeling slightly overwhelmed, please don't be, because we're going to take this step by step. We'll be revisiting some of this stuff. So don't worry if it didn't all go in the first time. We'll make sure that you're really fully equipped by the end of the week. Okay. All right. So good night, everyone. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope it's been fun for you as well. It certainly has for me. And I will see you tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Good night.